Clev Lubin has been as good as advertised through the first couple of games for the Louisville Cardinals.
You are Locked On Louisville, your daily podcast on the Louisville Cardinals. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Card Nation, what's going on, everyone? Welcome into this Tuesday edition of the Locked On Louisville podcast. I'm your host, Dalton Pence. This is my sixth year covering U of L, fourth year hosting this show, and I want to take the time to thank you all for making us your first listen of the day. Just a reminder, Locked On Louisville free and available on all streaming services. 5 days a week, your team every day. Don't forget to leave a comment in the YouTube section below, because that is a great way to help this show continue to grow. It is much appreciated. We're going to discuss a little bit more about how Clev Lubin has been balling out. He's been as good as advertised, if not better than advertised through the first couple of games for the Cardinals. Now, level of competition considered, the defensive line is turning into a huge strength for this team. Will that continue when the schedule gets tougher? We'll discuss here momentarily. We will explain why the offensive line just simply has to be better. I don't think I'm really shocking anyone by suggesting that, but we'll explain, what has been the offensive line's fault, what hasn't been, and much more. And then we will talk about some ACC Week 2 takeaways. It was not a good week at all for the Atlantic Coast Conference. Some things we learned, some things that, made my eyebrows raise a little bit. So we will discuss. But first, today's episode brought to you by FanDuel. Football season is here. Visit the FanDuel app today and start planning your futures bets now. So we're continuing to react to Louisville's 28-14 victory over James Madison on Friday. Talked about how the vibes aren't necessarily great, but 2-0 is 2-0. A win is a win. It didn't have to be pretty. You would have liked it to have been a satisfying victory and a comfortable victory. It wasn't probably either of those, but a win is a win. Could this have been a trap game that Louisville loses any of the past 2 years? Possibly, but they found a way to win, made some big plays in the second half. And one of those big plays was arguably the biggest play of the game. Like, you look at the three plays. Chris Bell's touchdown reception, Isaac Brown's rushing touchdown. Both were, of course, very significant. And then you had the defensive touchdown on 3rd and long, backed up on their own goal line. Alonzo Barnett drops back and gets sacked in the end zone. And AJ Green is able to recover the fumble forced by Clev Lubin, and Louisville gets their first lead of the game. Yes, they do end up missing the extra point, but 20-14 after trailing 14-6 right after the beginning of the third quarter. So Clev Lubin was a force to be reckoned with all night long. Like, he was one of the few bright spots on this team. I thought that the defensive line was incredible. Now, understanding that we have to take the level of competition into consideration. Eastern Kentucky, not really a good team. And James Madison, again, I think that the perception is still very different, but it feels like after Friday, a lot of fans believe that although James Madison might be a good team, it was Louisville kind of shooting themselves in the foot. Now, granted, I disagree from that standpoint. I think that James Madison was extremely well prepared. Like, this wasn't so much Louisville hurting themselves. Now, they did with the penalties, the turnover, giving up some suboptimal field position to James Madison. Like, Louisville didn't play a clean game, but you have to give credit to Bob Chesney and the Dukes, because this team was ready. They were amped. They were fired up, and you could see it from the very opening snap. Like, James Madison came ready to play, so credit where credit is due. James Madison, I feel like, is a solid team. Could this be a team that wins the Sun Belt? 100%. Are they going to be in the playoff consideration like some think that they might? After losing to Louisville, I'm not so sure, unless they just run the table and things happen in their favor. But anyway, level of competition. EKU, you're supposed to dominate. James Madison still, even though they were a good team, you were favored to win this game by double digits. You did. The score doesn't reflect how close this game was, but, a lot of things to work on. one of the few bright spots was that defensive line. Clev Lubin was incredible in this game. 10 total tackles. He was second on the team right behind TJ Quinn. 10 total tackles, was instrumental in defending the run and sealing that edge. 1.5 sacks, 1.5 tackles for loss, 1 forced fumble in this game. Like, this was one of those Clev Lubin legacy games. And coming into Louisville, 9.5 sacks for Coastal Carolina last year. The Cardinals have to go toe-to-toe with SEC programs for his services. And I understand that there is a long season left, right? There's a lot of games left to go. You still have to play the best teams on your schedule. But it's nice to see a guy that was advertised as a player who could end up being one of the best pass rushers in the ACC show that, because there are other players across the conference that are not showing that against inferior competition. So it's nice to see Clev not only be able to rush the passer in a proficient way, but also defend the run. And that's been awesome to see. You knew that James Madison was running the football. That's their forte. And Clev was still able to get 10 total tackles, 1.5 sacks. One of those forced the fumble in the end zone. And you watch him, and James Madison's doing everything they can to subdue Clev Lubin, and it's just not working. I mean, 1v1, he is overpowering guys. They're using running backs to try to chip him, and it's just not working. And he's just blowing by whoever is defending him, and it is creating such of an impact. It is wreaking havoc in the opposing backfields. Now, we understand that it was supposed to happen against Eastern Kentucky, but to see it happen against clearly a better team, and regardless if you think that James Madison is as good as advertised or not, I would definitely make the case that some of these ACC teams that the Cardinals will go up against this year, I think that James Madison is better than some of them. So now, are they on Clemson level, SMU or Miami? Perhaps not. But some other ACC teams, 100%, you best believe it. So overall, it's nice to see Clev doing what he's doing. Through the first 2 weeks, he's had 14 total tackles, and he didn't play the second half against EKU. 14 total tackles, 3.5 sacks, 1 forced fumble, multiple tackles for loss. It's been a really good start to the season. And if Louisville's defense wants to show that, hey, look, last year wasn't what we can be, let's bounce back. It's got to start with the push up front. And the Louisville defensive line through the first 2 weeks has passed the test with flying colors. Like, this defensive line looks really, really good. Clev Lubin is the headliner for the pass rushing group, but he's not the only one. AJ Green recovered that forced fumble in the end zone on Friday night. He's a guy that we have kind of circled as a breakout candidate because 6'6", 250 pounds, really highly rated recruit in that 2023 class. He started to begin to tap into that potential. He only has 7 tackles on the season, but he has 1 sack, 1 pass deflection, 1 fumble recovery for a touchdown. And he does not have the pass deflection. It's Antonio Watts. But he has been really good in getting into the opposing backfield. Wesley Bailey, another guy, Rutgers transfer, 10 tackles, 1 sack last week. This has been a by-committee approach, and we thought that it was going to be coming into the season because you can't really replace Ashton Gelati one-on-one. Like, it has to be a by-committee approach, and not to mention the other players that the Cardinals lost in their edge rushers room. But the interior, if Renee Conga and George Gerard can stay healthy, this interior defensive line is going to be troublesome for opposing offenses to try to defend, not only in defending the run. I thought that this team was very stout at defending the run coming into the season, and they proved that for the most part against James Madison. Looking at the stats, there wasn't longer than a 13-yard run. Like, Matt Saluka had a couple of decent runs out of the quarterback position. George Pettaway had a 12-yard run, but Pettaway ended 5 for 21, Saluka 21 for 83. So nobody averaged over 4.5 yards to carry in that James Madison backfield. Again, it's an offense that is really dominated by running the football. So not only is the interior showing that they can defend the run, but the pass rush and the push from the middle of this offensive line, the defensive line. Renee Conga, half of a sack. this season already. He's got 2 pass deflections, active hands at the line of scrimmage, and all of this definitely matters, and it's nice to see how much of a strength the defensive line has been. But, of course, the largest tests are still looming. Probably won't learn anything of substance until that Pittsburgh game, but it's nice to see the defensive line look the part versus the opposite at this point in the season. So love what I'm seeing from the defensive line. On the other side of the trenches, the offensive line, not so much. Simply put, the unit has to be better. Now, James Madison made things very interesting, so some things might not necessarily be the unit's fault, but we still have to talk about the offensive line needing to improve and improve quickly and significantly. And we will discuss when we come back on this Tuesday edition of the Locked On Louisville podcast. Card Nation, at this time, I want to tell you about our friends over at 5 Hour Energy. Time to fuel up and turn it up with 5 Hour Energy Transfusion. This grape, ginger, and lime-flavored shot brings the iconic taste of a golf course favorite to a non-alcoholic boost. Perfect for sinking birdies or making great memories with your friends. It's a hole-in-one for your energy game, whether you're out on the course or just need a little extra push to power through your day. 5 Hour Energy Transfusion delivers the clubhouse flavor you love without ever leaving the green. For me, the wildest shot that I've ever made, it might have been a fluke because my short game isn't the greatest, but I hit a chip from a bunker in a golf scramble and usually don't ever get close on those shots, but was nice to see that happen. And, golf is all about good times with good people and good flavors. The grape, ginger, lime flavor of 5 Hour Energy Transfusion gives you the best part of your clubhouse go-to without leaving the course or chasing down the bev cart. Now, you can amp up the fun even more. Just buy, snap, and enter for a chance to win a dream golf trip for 2 to any golf tournament in the United States. Tee up that trip. Visit 5hewin.com for full rules and entry. No purchase necessary. That excludes the Masters tournament, and this ends on October 31st. While I have you, let's talk about our friends and the title sponsor of the show, FanDuel. The NFL season is here. FanDuel is making sure you're ready for all of the kickoffs with a can't-miss offer. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if that $5 bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. I love using FanDuel because of the versatility. That is the way to go, whether I want to bet a money line parlay, same-game parlay, player props, or even jump in on the live bets. I can do that all on FanDuel. So if you're ready to play, download the FanDuel app by using FanDuel.com to get started. That's FanDuel.com to place your first $5 bet. As always, thank you so much for making us your first listen of the day. Just a reminder, Locked On Louisville, free and available on all streaming services, 5 days a week, your team every day. Be sure to hit that subscribe button. Leave a comment in the YouTube section below. Definitely appreciated for how much you all are helping the show continue to grow, but continuing to react from the first, I will say, 2 weeks of play for the Louisville Cardinals. 2-0, which, definitely could be much worse. But heading into the early week 3 bye, it's pretty clear that there are some aspects of the game that this team desperately needs to improve. And I would argue that as much as I didn't like the early bye in the offseason, now I'm like, I probably couldn't have come at a better time because, again, there are some pretty clear, there's some pretty clear reasons as to why the team needs this bye. Not only do you need to get healthy, Trevante Sylvester, Nate Koriski, but there are some aspects that you need to go to the film room and just figure out how to improve. Because like I mentioned, I'm not ready to throw in the towel 2 games into the season. Is the offensive line play encouraging to me? No, not at all. It's been the opposite. But I trust Jeff Brohm and Richard Owens to be able to make some adjustments and get the most out of this group. Like last year, the offensive line had some questions about the tackle position. And by the end of the year, you really didn't hear much about the O-line. Like they did their job. But to begin this season, that hasn't been the case. Now, week 1, it's hard to tell. You're playing Eastern Kentucky. The starters aren't playing past halftime or just into the third quarter. But outside of a couple of Isaac Brown big-time runs, there wasn't much push up front. Like I was expecting the offensive line to dominate the EKU front 7 more than they did. And I kind of chalked it up to the first game a lot of new guys on that line and say, you know what? Let's move on. Well, week 2, James Madison went all out. They went feast or famine defense. They said, we are bringing the house on every play, and we are going to force you to make big plays to win the game. And Louisville did that, but man, it was too close for comfort until late in the fourth quarter. Now, here's the thing. Jeb Brohm mentioned in the postgame press conference that James Madison surprised them with how all out they went. They ran a lot of zero blitz, basically meaning that it's man coverage on the outside. You're rushing as many players as you can. That's kind of the long story short way of explaining what a zero blitz is. And James Madison loaded the box. They said, you know what? You're going to have to throw the ball and make big plays to beat us. And you can blame the offensive line. Here's where it kind of gets tricky because, yes, two things can be true at one time. I think that the offensive line has to be better at generating push. They have to be better at creating gaps. But in the same breath, how are you supposed to create that much space up front when you've got 5 guys blocking and your opponent is consistently bringing 6, 7, 8 guys? So it's kind of the law of mathematics. You're not going to be able to block 7, 8 guys rushing the quarterback or trying to defend the run when you've got 5 guys blocking. You might have the running back trying to chip one of the guys rushing in. You might have an inline blocker at tight end trying to subdue the opposing pass rush. And this is, I think, where you really missed Nate Kariski, and you also missed Trevante Sylvester. So is every team moving forward going to be implementing that much of a feast or famine defense? Probably not. Are opposing defenses going to watch this game against James Madison and take things away from it and apply to their defense? You best believe it. Like, I would imagine that teams are going to send the house. Teams are going to blitz Miller Moss and make him win the game. Now, granted, with as much as you learn from this game, I do think that having seen this, Louisville is going to have a better plan for trying to counteract it. Now, Brohm mentioned they tried to get some stuff going in the short game, and James Madison's defensive backs made life miserable. And you kind of get in your head a little bit. You don't make those throws, and Louisville plays a little bit scared, but you got the win. Now it's about learning from it. How can the offensive line play be better? Because I think that the O-line just has to be better. I mean, yes, teams are going to sell out to defend the run at times. If that's the case, Miller Moss and the receivers have to be on the same page. There has to be a limit of drops. There has to be good throws, and the offensive line has to give Miller Moss time. Like, I will give Miller one thing. Every time he snapped the ball on Friday night, it seemed like he was scrambling for his life because either there was a free rusher or Louisville was just unable to defend a veteran deep front 7 from the James Madison Dukes. So Trevante Sylvester, you need him to get back as soon as he can, veteran on that offensive line. But overall, I mean, as much as things might not necessarily be the personnel's fault up front, I would argue that what we've seen has been very subpar. Like, this offensive line has to be better, because if the Louisville rushing attack doesn't get going, and it's kind of being skewed because Isaac Brown has played Superman a couple of times. He's had 3 big runs in the first 2 weeks. And you have to imagine that when you're playing better teams, you're going to be playing better teams up front too, better athletes, larger, faster, stronger. It's going to happen. Pittsburgh is going to be a challenge up front. Miami, Clemson, SMU. It's not going to get easier from here on out. So the offensive line has to figure out how to be better up front. And I think that kind of sounds cliche, but I went back and watched that game, and I'm like, man, if Miller Moss has more time to throw there, or if the offensive line creates more gaps, I'm more worried about the team in opening up gaps in the run game than I am pass pro. Like, I think that pass pro will come around when you're not one-dimensional. And on Friday night, the Cardinals were one-dimensional outside of one big run. So this unit just has to improve on, I mean, whether it's communication, whether it is identifying assignments. There were times where 2 offensive linemen were blocking one guy. Running backs have to be better in pass pro. I think you're going to see the tight ends have to improve. It's going to be all hands on deck, right? Like, I'm trying not to single out just the offensive line, but the offensive line is what makes this vehicle go. Like, Louisville's rushing attack is not dangerous if you don't have the space for these guys to run through. Duke and Isaac are great. They can only do so much if there's no holes for them to run through. They can only do so much if once they get the ball, boom, there's somebody in the backfield ready to bring them down. It's not a recipe for success. So the offensive line has to improve, whether that's coaching, whether it is just kind of looking in the mirror and soul searching, a little bit of column A, column B, who knows. But O-line has to be better. Something improved in the bye week going into that game against Bowling Green. But week 2 is done. And it was not a good week for the Atlantic Coast Conference. We learned some things, some teams continuing to skid. I think that at this point, Miami probably is the best team in the conference. But Florida State might be giving them a run for their money. It's kind of too early, but we'll discuss what we learned from the ACC in week 2 when we come back on this Tuesday edition of the Locked On Louisville podcast. Card Nation, this is the best time of the year. With college football back, the tailgates, rivalries, energy in the stands, there's nothing like it. But let's be real. Actually getting tickets can feel like more of a battle than the game itself, with the endless queues, hidden fees, and prices jumping out at checkout. That's why I use Game Time, the app that gives the advantage back to the fans. It's the easiest way to score last-minute ticket deals at the best prices with no surprise fees. What you see is what you pay. If you pulled up Game Time before any of the first 2 games, you could have seen all the amazing deals and prices going down closer to kickoff against Eastern Kentucky and James Madison. And what I love most about the app is that you get a panoramic view of your seat when you look at all of the different options. So take the guesswork out of buying college football tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, that's the promo code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go. Download Game Time today. At the time of recording of this show for the Tuesday edition, we hadn't gotten official word on the Stanquan Clark injury diagnosis or timeline. So if we get that at any point on Monday or even early on Tuesday, we will just discuss it on Wednesday. But kind of at the mercy of the timing aspect of it, but I don't have the official word on it just yet, hoping we get some type of word so we can discuss on Wednesday. But to conclude the show today, let's talk about the rest of the conference. And this was a week where various ACC teams were playing against Power 4 opponents, and it just wasn't a good week. I don't think that any of the ACC teams that played a Power 4 opponent got a victory. Stanford, Boston College, Virginia Tech, SMU, and Duke all lost to Power 4 teams. Now, the non-factors of the week, teams that beat other teams that they were supposed to. Miami got a blowout victory against Bethune-Cookman. Florida State got a huge blowout victory against East Texas A&M, 77-3. Pittsburgh demolished Central Michigan. Georgia Tech, without Haynes King, handled Gardner-Webb. Wake Forest, over 30-point victory against Western Carolina. And Cal, a 32-point victory against Texas Southern. So you still have those easier non-conference games that are going on at the moment. But this was a tough week. Of course, Louisville survived, but they didn't look great. And speaking of surviving but not looking great, North Carolina coming off of a week 1 blowout against TCU, like they beat Charlotte 20-3. Not really all that inspiring. Syracuse got blown out to Tennessee week 1. They had to take an overtime victory, 27-20 against UConn. So kind of TBD on how good the Huskies are this year, but I would probably venture into saying not great. And the one that is surprising me the most, like I swore they were going to bounce back, but what the reality was is that they were trailing 16-3 at half. And if it wasn't for a big second half, they would have been 0-2. Clemson beat Troy by 11 at Clemson. And yes, I know that Troy won the first game, but they only beat their opponent, who was an FCS team, by 18. So Troy doesn't seem to be all that good of a team. And we're at the moment now where Clemson against Georgia Tech, this upcoming weekend at Tech is going to be a one that I'm really watching. Like Louisville has a bye week. Let's take a look at Georgia Tech and Clemson, because this could be a huge game in terms of implications on a conference championship bid, because Georgia Tech's schedule isn't the greatest. If they beat Clemson, watch out. This could be an interesting ride for Georgia Tech. Now, they weren't great against Colorado, but they got it done. But if they beat Clemson, I mean, they don't have to play Louisville or SMU or Miami. Like, they have Virginia Tech, who doesn't look good. Duke just got blown out. I mean, Georgia Tech, with a win against Clemson, they could be one of the favorites to get to the conference championship game because the schedule is so bad. But even then, I thought that Clemson was just not impressive once again. And then you have the teams that were playing against Power 4 competition. Duke, I was really interested to see how they were going to play in a home game against Illinois, and they looked fraudulent. They lost 45-19, just got absolutely demolished. The defense was not good. Darian Mensah had 334 passing yards, but, I mean, it only resulted in 19 points. Like, this was just not a good game for the Duke Blue Devils, and I think that it kind of puts them on fraud watch a little bit, in my opinion. Stanford very well might be the worst team in the conference. They lost 27-3 at BYU, and this would have been a great year for Louisville to have played Stanford. Boston College went into a 2-overtime shootout with Michigan State, ended up losing that game. And Boston College, I think with Bill O'Brien, maybe it is a year where they're going to be respectable. They play Louisville in October, but I don't think Michigan State is really all that good of a team. So I think Boston College is going to be that middle-of-the-pack ACC squad. And then perhaps the most disappointing team, and I know that they had played 2 SEC teams to start the season, but they lost by double digits to both. Virginia Tech lost against South Carolina in Atlanta opening weekend 24-11. And you know what? South Carolina, Lenora Sellers, Shane Beamer, like, I expected that loss. But Vanderbilt, they had a 10-point lead against Vanderbilt, and they ended up losing by 24 points. They got outscored 24. What was that? They ended up getting outscored 34-0 in the second half at Virginia Tech, at Lane Stadium. Brent Pry perhaps might be on the hottest seat in the ACC. Now, they do have Old Dominion and Wofford following up, but, I mean, I mentioned that the Virginia Tech game is going to be tough because where you're playing, but there's a chance that Virginia Tech, I mean, could have a new coach by the time they play the Cardinals. It could be an interim head coach. So this was just not a good weekend. I think that you're seeing that, I mean, the ACC is wide open. The two teams that have consistently showed up and showed out is the two Florida teams, Florida State and Miami. Miami beat Bethune-Cookman. They're 2-0. They have a very interesting game this weekend on the CW network against a ranked South Florida team who just beat Florida. They beat Boise State in the first week. So very interested to see how that works. Florida State, who's now number 10, they're probably going to pick up another easy win after the bye. They have a bye week this week, and then they have a game against Kent State. But there's a matchup against Miami looming a little bit later in the fall, early October. So Florida State and Miami, I would say that at the moment, those two teams are the best in the conference. And I think that you have Louisville, Clemson. I didn't even mention, SMU lost at home to Baylor. Now, Baylor, Sawyer Robertson throwing the football all over the field. Like, he's fantastic. But SMU lost a lead in this game. They lost in double overtime, 48-45 defensively. They got shredded. TJ Harden was really good running the football, had 3 touchdowns, 115 yards for the Mustangs. But can Rhett Lashley's defense prove to be better moving forward? So SMU, going to be an interesting thing. I mean, they play at Missouri State next week, or this upcoming week, but then they got TCU. So I think that right now my tier list would be currently Miami and Florida State are at that top part. I think Miami just over Florida State. I would say SMU Clemson and Louisville are in that tier 2. I think that in terms of overall talent, Georgia Tech probably is in tier 2 at the moment. But right now, that's kind of where we sit. I'm interested to see. We're probably not going to learn much from this upcoming week. Virginia and NC State was the only conference game that played. NC State ended up winning that. It got to a little bit of a shootout, 35-31. I thought that NC State, it's still kind of TBD. They're winning, but it's by the skin of their teeth. They've got Wake Forest this week. I think they're going to win that game, but it is a road game. Virginia, on the other hand, I didn't mind what I saw from Tony Elliott's team. They've got William and Mary this week. So ultimately, we learned that the ACC probably isn't as good as advertised outside of their week 1 performances. So we need to see this conference bounce back, and going to be watching that Clemson-Georgia Tech game. And honestly, Louisville fans should probably be cheering for Clemson because of how easy Georgia Tech's remainder of the schedule is. But that's going to wrap up this Tuesday edition of the show. Everyone have a great day. We'll see you back here tomorrow. Go Cards.